In the last chapter, we looked at the status quo of your company regarding to your business goals. And in this chapter, we look into the future and try to figure out what might be the ideal scenario for your business model. So, what does this mean? I would love to at least forecast what might be the customer acquisition cost minimum and what might be the customer lifetime value maximum related to your business model DNA metrics. This means this would be the ideal scenario for your business. At least in theory, we can't forecast the future, but it's a good exercise in regards to analysis of risks and opportunities. How to do so? Let's take your business model DNA and let's try to figure out for each metric what might be the best value you want to achieve and you can achieve or you commit to achieve within the next 3 to 5 years. This sounds like mission impossible, but trust me, I do this since a long time, and for 70-80% of the metrics it's easier to do, to figure out what it might be, and the usual suspects like conversion rates and lifetimes, they might be a little bit trickier, but there we have still, fortunately, the industry benchmarks. So we're going back to the idea. So take each metric and look at the value and try to figure out what you want to achieve and what do you think it's realistic to achieve within the next 3 to 5 years. Why 3 to 5 years? Because this is the normal scope of a financial planning, of a business plan, and this is also interesting for investors and should be also interesting for you. So let's try to figure out why it might be easy for 70 to 80% of the metrics. What are the metrics normally? It might be something like, what's the salary of a salesperson? What's the cost per click price for your target audience in Facebook? And or what's the price for your product related to competition and so on and so forth. So in all these cases, it's easier to get an idea what's the minimum salary you can offer to still find the right employees, what might be the lowest cost per click price for your target audience, and what might be the highest product price for your product in comparison of the prices of your competition. So there it's easier to figure out what might be the best you want to achieve. If you look at the usual suspects, then it's a little bit trickier. So, but fortunately, there are still things like industry benchmarks, and they are normally ranges. So that means if you find out, for example, what's the average lifetime for small to medium-sized companies in a subscription model, it might be a benchmark like they stay in average 2 to 3 years. So, and then take the 3 years as the maximum. You can imagine what you might be able to achieve within the next years. So it's a little bit up to you whether you're optimistic or more pessimistic, whether you take a higher number or a lower number. My recommendation would be take the numbers where you feel committed to, where you would sign as a team, yes, we are really convinced that we can achieve this value within the next 3 to 5 years. So at the end, it's a little bit up to you whether you're more optimistic or pessimistic. But after you did that, for each metric, we have the ideal setup for the business model DNA. So each metric has the value where you think this is the best you are able to achieve within the next 3 to 5 years. So if you calculate based on this ideal setup of the business model DNA with the ideal values of each metric you are committing to achieve within the next 3 to 5 years, then you get at least rough estimates of the customer acquisition cost minimum and the customer lifetime value maximum. And even if you have rough ideas here, it's such an important exercise. Because if you look at the two numbers, So if the maximum is much, much higher than the minimum of the customer acquisition cost, then your business model might be less risky, or it's more likely that you can achieve this situation. Why? Because even if some of the metric values are not achieving the best value you just assumed, then there's still enough space to get profitable. There's still enough space to earn more per customer than you spend. The closer they are together, even in the ideal scenario, the riskier it is, because if one or more of the metrics are not reaching the ideal value, then it might turn around. And there's even a very worst case scenario, which is called riding a dead horse. Meaning, in this scenario, even in the ideal situation, with the ideal setup for your business model DNA, the customer acquisition cost might be higher than the customer lifetime value. So you can't get profitable, or more or less, it's very unlikely that you get profitable. So that's why this exercise is so important. And a lot of experts say, including me, that you need to check whether the customer lifetime value maximum is 3 to 10 times higher than the customer acquisition cost minimum. If so, then it's less risky. And if you have a lower factor, then there might be the risk that your business model might turn around into a dead horse. What are you doing if you have a dead horse, or if there is a high chance that you might get a dead horse, that you might ride a dead horse? What are you doing? Fortunately, there are 4 things you can do to handle this situation. The first one is you check your business model DNA and you try to figure out what metrics are the main reason why this is a dead horse. So remember, in the previous chapters we talked about blocking metrics. So that are metrics which are blocking you from achieving lower customer acquisition costs and higher lifetime values. So what was the idea? The idea was to kick the blocking metrics out of your DNA, meaning you are doing a pivot of your business model. You are changing your business model based on that information. Meaning you kick out this metric by changing a marketing and sales channel, or changing a conversion step, or changing the revenue model. So the idea is that you kick out this blocking metric and replace the metric by new metrics, and hopefully these ones are not blocking anymore. In my personal experience, my gut feeling is saying in 80% of the cases where you might have a dead horse, it is possible to do a pivot and to make it look better afterwards, in 80% of the cases. What else can you do if you have a dead horse? Another option might be that you are starting to gamble, meaning you hope that you can reduce the customer acquisition cost minimum to 0 by viral growth. So you hope for the viral miracle or the viral wonder, and or you are able to convince traffic partners, sales partners in an early stage to agree to a revenue share model where they give you the customers for free in the first step, and then they want to share the revenues. In both cases, you could technically change the dead horse into a successful, or in a business model which might be successful. Unfortunately, getting this viral wonder done, as well as finding a traffic partner, is very unlikely and very rare, especially in an early stage. But it is possible, and you could try, and be please aware of that it's a very high likelihood it might not work. The third thing you can do is you change the business goal. You might say, oh, okay, I can't get profitable, but maybe strong growth is still possible, and I'm, for example, looking for an investor where you get the money for strong growth, and then you build a big customer base and or you create big revenue figures, but you're not getting profitable, but maybe you're lucky and you're finding a strategic buyer which is interested in buying your database, or which is interested to grow even further, and or they have other plans but they are interested in buying your company. Whether this works for you, whether you can change the business goal and or you might find a buyer afterwards, it's dependent on so many different aspects, but it would be an option. And the last thing you could do is, if you are not really successful with the pivot, you do not want to gamble with viral wonder and traffic partners, and you do not want to change the business goal, or you can't change the business goal, then there might be the hard option of stopping your business and hopefully finding a different other idea which sounds more successful. If you do not want to get profitable, obviously you can exactly do the same thing with growth rates, with revenue figures, and or with number of sales. And then the ideal scenario would be, what's the maximum number of customers you can get within the next 3 to 5 years? What would be the maximum amount of revenues you could achieve within the next years? And this is exactly the same approach, but just with different goal metrics.